Hello everybody, welcome to week 2 of the course. Hope everybody's semester is off to a good start. A few logistical things to get us going. First, good job on your introductions last week. I thought you guys did a great job. And that's the kind of dialogue back and forth. I noticed that you guys were really commenting on each other's videos and things like that. That's what I'm looking for in the discussions. So great job on that. It was great to hear about some of your aspirations and what you guys have been up to. Sounds like an interesting group. Okay, the second thing is that I've broken you guys down into your discussion groups. So if you go on to Canvas and go under Files, there's a Group Assignments folder there. You can go into that, and for the first Group Assignments list is up there. So that's what you guys will be doing your discussions coming up on in those particular groups, group 1, group 2, etc. So yeah, so I think that's it. This is going to be one of the shorter videos just because we didn't have anything substantive really going on last week. We didn't have anything to discuss. But this week we're actually moving into the discussion portion of the course. And this week we're looking at sort of the religious foundations of American political theory. And I can say a little bit about that. I don't want to say too much right now because I want you guys to give your own analysis, unvarnished or unbiased, based on what I'll say. But I'll say more about my thoughts on the readings and the discussion and in the video next week. But the two things we're looking at this particular week are we're looking at, or at least we're listening to Jon Meacham's iTunes U podcast, American Gospel, which is based upon a book he wrote with the same title. So if you enjoyed the podcast, I suggest you read his book. He also wrote another book called Jefferson, The Art of Power. And it's all about Thomas Jefferson and his sort of life and political influence and how he was a very politically savvy individual and how he rose to power. But Meacham is talking about God, right? And he's talking about religion. And he makes some really interesting statements in that podcast where he, for instance, one of the things that jumped out at me was this notion that there is a separation of church and state in America, but there's not a separation between religion and politics, which we often think of as sort of synonymous, the two. But he makes a pretty interesting distinction there. And he talks about a public religion and sort of the notion of God and religion that the Founding Fathers had when they reference God. For instance, when Jefferson references God in the Declaration of Independence, or God is referenced in the preamble to the Constitution. What kind of God are we talking about, right? And are we talking about a Christian God necessarily? And I'll leave it up to you guys to figure out what Meacham has to say about that. The second thing we're reading is John Winthrop's Model of Christian Charity, which is actually a sermon. And so John Winthrop was a Puritan, and he came over to he came over to the colonies at that point. It was not the United States. And he served as the governor of New England for, I believe, 20 years. So a long time. And he had a really influential impact on the evolution of the colonies and sort of their religious beliefs. Interestingly enough, he wasn't, you would think from reading his sermon or his message, that he was a minister. In fact, he was a lawyer, but a very very astute one and very religiously well versed. So he sort of lays out the model, right, of this is what we want the colonies to look like. The Puritan model. The Puritans who had sort of been expelled from England with the restoration of the new king, and they thought that with this new monarch that they weren't going to have the types of religious freedom that they thought that they should have after sort of the Protestant Reformation and things like that. So that's when they came over to New England to try to live up to the the values that they thought they believed, religious liberty, right? Which is an interesting tension between the Christian model that they put forward of sort of the Christian way of being and the importance of being a believer in Christ and things like that, with this notion of religious freedom. However, in the beginning of the sermon in the paper, Winthrop talks a lot about diversity, right? And how diversity is important and multiculturalism and things like that. So that's an interesting read as well. Some very famous passages that have had a pretty profound impact on American political theory. Winthrop talks about America, or the colonies, in this case New England, as it should be a city on a hill. And that is in reference to a passage from the Bible, from the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus says that Christianity and Christians should seek to be a city on the hill where everybody looks up to, right? So they're sort of the ideal. And Winthrop thought that, if New England based their colonies on these Christian principles that he lays out in this paper, in this sermon, that they would also serve as a beacon, right? A city on the hill that everybody else should look up to and try to emulate. And then, in that is sort of the precursor of this notion of American exceptionalism, right? America's different than everybody else. Some people would say we're better than other people, right? I mean, the Statue of Liberty is a good example, right? I mean, the Statue of Liberty holds the beacon of liberty, right? So it's an ideal in that way, and the rest of the world is supposed to sort of look up to us as the beacons of liberty who export our way of government and our democracy to other countries. Likewise, Winthrop thought that New England could be the beacon of, maybe if not the beacon of liberty, in this case, the beacon of Christian charity, right, is what he was going for. But it's interesting to sort of like juxtapose the two positions that Meacham and Winthrop lays out. And that's what we're going to be talking about in our discussion question. So following the weekly format, what I'll do is tomorrow morning I will post the discussion questions, or the discussion question. You guys will discuss it in your groups. And as I said, you can find your groups on the Canvas page under the Files tab. So go in there and do a discussion on that. Remember to respond to my post, and try to respond to others' posts in your group as well. You have until Saturday at midnight to complete the assignment. The last thing is, if you had any trouble accessing the iTunes U episode, let me know. It's pretty simple, right? So there are a couple ways to do it. You have to have iTunes, obviously. You go into the iTunes store, and I think it's on the right-hand side. There's a little title for iTunes U. You just click on that. You go in there, and you type in American Gospel. Remember, you don't want the American Gospel book. You want the American Gospel iTunes episode that he did. I think it's 1 hour and 9 minutes. So you can actually just play it on the iTunes store. There's a play button right next to it. Or you can download it to your iTunes library. If you do that, you go back into your iTunes library. In the top left-hand corner, there's a musical note. There's a TV screen, and to the right of the TV screen are 3 dots. You click on those 3 dots, you can get to iTunes University that way, and you should be able to, if you downloaded the episode, you should be able to find it there. But if you have any problems with that, let me know. I'll be happy to help you try to work that out. All right, so I will post the discussion question tomorrow. I look forward to hearing your responses and interacting with you in that way. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. And then next week, I'll talk about the themes that emerge in the discussion and the things that are important to take away from the readings and the iTunes episode for this week. All right, hope you guys have a great week.